Good morning. Welcome to what is becoming the new norm for many of us in the church. I was very much hoping that we would be able to be back in the sanctuary for this last Sunday of March, but with the stay-at-home orders, both on the local and state level, it looks like that is not going to be the case for quite some time, and we're looking at possibly having Easter virtually. So welcome. I'm glad you all are here, and I am very much grateful for technology that allows us to connect, if not virtually, but via these videos. And thank you for all that have given me such wonderful feedback, and just continue to share these videos with everyone that you meet. It'd be great if we could share these videos with as many people as we could. Want to begin this morning by talking about one of the scripture references that is available for this Sunday, the 29th, I believe. I'm losing track of the days again. But it is the story of Lazarus, which is found in John 11, 1 through 45. And Lazarus is a resident of Bethany, which is outside of Jerusalem, and he is also the brother of two sisters we should very much remember, Mary and Martha. You'll remember Mary is the one who wept on the feet of Jesus and cleaned his feet with her hair, which was very scandalous. And then Martha is the one when Jesus came to their house to eat. Martha was very busy getting dinner ready, and Mary was sitting at the feet of Jesus, and Martha got very irritated by the fact that Mary was not helping. And let Jesus know, hey, tell her to get up and go help me. And Jesus went, well, Martha, maybe you could come here and sit and listen too. And so this is their brother, and Lazarus is ill, deathly ill. And they send word to Jesus saying, hey, Jesus, this brother that you love so much, he's ill. Please come. And Jesus knows that he's ill, and it's deathly ill, but he also knows that this illness, this death, this perceived death, is going to be used for God's glory. And so Jesus says he'll come, but he stays there where he's at, and they don't tell us exactly where he's at, but he stays there for 2 more days. And then at the end of 2 days, he says, hey, to his disciples, hey, we need to go to Judea. And his disciples are going, Jesus, the last time you went through there, they wanted to stone you. Why do you want to go back? No, that's not a good idea. Let's go any other direction other than the way to Judea. And he's going, no, we've got to go see our brother Lazarus. He's ill. He's fallen asleep. And they don't get it. They don't get it, because the disciples can be a little dense sometimes. But he goes, no, he's dead. He's fallen ill and he has died. And they say, but he says, don't worry, this has been for God's glory. God's glory will be established. And so they're all in. And so they go and they're on the road, and as they're approaching Bethany, approaching the house of Lazarus and his sisters, there's just people lining the road, mourning, and just mourning the death of Jesus, or of Lazarus, and who's been dead now for 4 days and been placed in the tomb. And the Jews are just out in numbers consoling Martha and Mary over the death of their brother, because Lazarus was much beloved. Now, this is a story we need to remember of foreshadowing of what will happen later on in the story with Jesus. So you're going to see a lot of similarities between this story and the story that will lead to the cross and to the tomb of Jesus. Now, Martha comes out. She's the first to greet Jesus, and Martha comes out, if you had been here, Jesus, I'm glad you're here, but if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. And Jesus goes, your brother will rise again. And Martha's going, I know he'll rise again in the resurrection. Yes, I believe that. Yes, you're right. I know that. And Jesus goes, Martha, I am the resurrection and the life. Do you believe that? Do you believe in me? And this is foreshadowing, guys. And Martha goes, I believe you are the Messiah. And so somebody goes and runs and tells Mary that Jesus is coming down the road, and Mary gets up. She's in the house with a bunch of other folks and mourning, and she gets up and leaves suddenly, and then they think, oh, she's going to go to the tomb and do some real mourning at the tomb, and so she comes out and she sees Jesus, and you know what she says? The exact same thing her sister said. If you had been here, my brother would not have died. And we're told that Jesus is greatly disturbed by the outpouring of grief for Lazarus. At that moment, he's disturbed, and this is a really interesting aspect of this scripture, is because we get to see the reality of Jesus's humanity in this moment, of seeing how beloved Lazarus was, and how much of an effect his death had on the people. And this disturbs Jesus a bit. And so he goes to the tomb. Now, Lazarus has been in there for 4 days. It's got a rock across it, but it's not sealed hermetically. It stinks. You can smell it from outside the tomb. And Jesus goes, roll away that rock from that tomb. He's not dead. And they're going, but Jesus, he stinketh. That's my son's favorite part of this whole story. He stinketh. You don't want to go in there. Whew. Phew. And Jesus says, roll away that stone. He is not dead. More foreshadowing, y'all, of what is to come. And then he says a prayer. And he says this prayer to the Lord. Thank you, Lord, for hearing me. I know you have always heard me. I am always saying this for the folks that are around here so that they will believe. Because he knows they're not understanding what's happening. He knows they're not understanding just who he is. In this story, in Lazarus' life, in the world. And then he says, Lazarus, come out. And he does. Comes out bandaged and barely being able to walk because the wrappings are around him. He goes, unbind him. Unbind him. And then we're told that many Jews come to believe because of the glory of God that is shown in that day. This is very much a story of foreshadowing of what will happen. And it should encourage us to ask ourselves, what does it mean? What does it mean for us to be children, peoples of the resurrection and the light? What does it mean to believe that? To believe that we are children, that we are peoples of the resurrection and the light of Jesus Christ? What does that mean for you? There's a gentleman I want to talk about this morning, and this comes out of the Book of Common Prayer. Great book, highly recommend it. Great resource. If you have not checked it out, please do check it out. They have a smaller one and a larger one. I like both of them. And this is a story of Oscar Romero, who was an archbishop, a very conservative archbishop in El Salvador before the 1980s. And he, as a conservative archbishop, he was not very fond of what was going on in his church at that moment, which was a progressive liberation theology that was happening. And this liberation theology was very much concerned with the plight of the working poor and the non-working poor, of the people that were being exploited by both the government and business at that time in El Salvador. And he just wasn't really digging it. He really wasn't. He was not a fan of it, and he was not a supportive of those fellow priests, fellow folks in his church that were very supportive of it and preaching this liberation theology. That is until one of his priest friends, who was a part of the movement, was assassinated. Now, after his friend was assassinated, he began to preach in the churches and in his ministry as a fervent opponent against the government, because he knew that's who killed his priest friend, and he became a huge spokesman for this liberation theology in a way, and really against the elitist government. And he knew this was going to anger the military, and it did. It angered the military at the time, who were in control of El Salvador, and he knew he was putting his life in jeopardy. It was foreshadowing, in a foreshadowing moment of what would happen to his life. He said in a sermon, a bishop will die, but the church of God, the people, will not perish. A bishop will die, but the church of God, the people, will not perish. And then he went on to write, again, and this is from this book, it helps to know, it helps now and then to step back and take the long view. The kingdom is not only beyond our efforts, it is beyond our vision. We accomplish in our lifetime only a tiny fraction of the magnificent enterprise that is the Lord's work, only a tiny bit. Nothing we do is complete, which is another way of saying that the kingdom always lies beyond us. No sermon says all that should be said. No prayer fully expresses our faith. No confession brings perfection. No pastoral visit brings wholeness. No program accomplishes the church's mission. No set of goals and objectives includes everything. That is what we are about. We plant the seeds that one day will grow. We water the seeds already planted, knowing they hold future promise. We lay foundations that will need further development. We provide yeast that affects far beyond our capabilities. We cannot do everything, and there is a sense of liberation in realizing that. This enables us to do something and do it very, very well. It may be incomplete, but it's a beginning, a step along the way, an opportunity for the Lord's grace to enter and do the rest. We may never see the end results, but that is the difference between the master builder and the worker. We are workers, not master builders, ministers, not messiahs. We are prophets of a future that is not our own. We are prophets of a future that is not our own, y'all. We are. I added the y'all part. He didn't speak Southernese. We are prophets of a future that is not our own. When we think about that and ask ourselves, what does it mean to be a church of peoples of the resurrection and the life? What does that mean for us, church? What does that mean that the church of God, the people, will not perish? It may be incomplete, but at a beginning, a step along the way. Oscar Romero says there's a great deal of liberation, there's a great deal of freedom that comes from knowing that knowing that we are not the end-all be-all. Although we like to think sometimes we are the end-all be-all, that we've got all the answers, we don't, and we don't have to. We have to find that thing that God is calling us to do and just do it well. Just do it well. Not thinking that will be the end of it, but that will probably be just a piece of it. That some people way before us started it, and we're taking it up now, and people way past us will keep it going. Maybe finish it. Maybe not. Maybe it'll change completely. Maybe it'll take a different tact. But it will be of God. And that's freeing. And that should be freeing for us as peoples of this resurrection and life. See, you and I get to sort of go, well, I don't have to have all the answers. I don't have to know exactly where this is going all the time. I don't have to be the one in control. Now, I like hearing that because I'm sort of a control freak. I like to be in control, but it also gives me a great deal of anxiety. Knowing that God is the one that's in control makes me feel a lot better. A lot better because I'm not God. And I haven't met anybody who is that perfect. I like to tell people there was only one perfect being ever on this earth, and we hung him on a cross. Sort of is deep to think about for a while. And freeing. a little bit, as Oscar Romero says, because we can just do that one thing well. And then we can move on. We can stop beating ourselves up for it not being perfect. We can stop thinking that we have all the answers, because we don't have to have all the answers. All we have to do is have God in our heart and to be willing and able to do the work that God has given us. Oscar Romero knew that the cup that God had placed in his hands was probably going to lead to his death. And I think he probably could sort of talk about that and foreshadow his own death, because he had accepted that fact and was just going to go, okay, that's in God's hands now. I'm going to do what I can do right now and do it well. And the truth is he wasn't very effective in stopping the corruption during his lifetime. So in 1980, he was assassinated by the government. March 24th, 1980. He was assassinated. All these wonderful things that he wanted to happen in his home country of El Salvador never happened during his lifetime. But he knew that the work that he had started, that he had become a part of, would continue on in other peoples of the church beyond him. Even though he was an archbishop, he was a bigwig, other people would take up the fight and continue it on. Because, see, he knew that God's church, the people, would not perish. You know, this is a lovely sanctuary. It's got a center aisle, great. It's got this lovely altar, wonderful seating, great acoustics. It's not the church. It's not. It says it on that sign outside. I walked by it when I came in here. It's Commonwealth United Methodist Church. But it's not the church. The people who come here on Sundays, the people who have worshiped here over the years, the clergy that have helped lead these folks, that is the church. You see, you and I, we are the church. We are the ones that will affect the changes, will affect the kingdom work that needs to be done here on earth as in heaven. We will find that one thing that God is calling us to do and do it very well, even though it may be incomplete, even though we may not see the fruit of that labor, even though we may be just tilling the ground, that somebody will come and plant a seed, that somebody else will come and water, that somebody else will come and weed out the weeds, that somebody else will come and spray the pesticides, and that somebody else will come and then harvest the fruit. And then what is done with that fruit, who knows? But we may just be that little part of it. That is the church, my friends, that little part. That little part that knows that God is in charge, that can engage in that liberation and that freedom of knowing that we do not have to be in complete control for God's work to be done here on earth. And this, for a control freak like myself, is scary and also very liberating. It's scary in the fact that I have to admit that I'm not in control of something, and it's also very liberating in getting to say that I am not in control of that. And I think that's what Oscar Romero was figuring out, that this huge thing that was happening in his home country of El Salvador was way too big for him to understand, but it was not too big for God to understand. And so right now we are in this pandemic. We are being ravaged by this virus that we do not completely understand, that we do not necessarily have adequate medical treatment for. We don't have enough ventilators for everybody, it seems. New York is ungodly a number of ventilators they're going to need, they're projecting. And we don't know what we're going to do in a lot of respects. We do know that if we can't flatten the curve, that we're in trouble. So we're doing all that we can do to try to flatten that curve. But the reality is, a lot of this is going to be in God's hands. God will help heal the sick, I know that, with the help of a lot of well-trained medical professionals. God will help find a cure with the help through people that are much smarter than I am in that kind of stuff, and vaccines and stuff like that. And we will find a way through this with God's help. This I know. And God will help us to stay at home, to not infect one another, to do what is right, to share resources, to go to the grocery store, and if you see toilet paper or canned goods, not buy everything, but leave some for somebody else. This is what we're called to do as children of the resurrection and the life. To not think of ourselves, but to think of others. To not think that we have all the answers and we're complete and perfect, but to know that we are just a small part of an incomplete process that is only being completed by God. This is what it means to me to be a child of the resurrection and the life. When I read this story of Lazarus and when I read about Oscar Romero, I understand better what I'm supposed to be doing here on earth, what I'm supposed to be doing in my ministry. So as we go into these next few weeks, this next week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or however long it is that we have to go through all this pandemic stuff before we can get back to the old normal. And don't think, my friends, that this new normal is not going to affect the old normal. One thing is for certain in this life, change happens, and it happens often. But as we go forward into these coming weeks, as we come and march closer and closer to Easter, even if we can't have Easter Sunday here in this sanctuary, it will still be Easter, my friends. We will still be Easter people as we march closer and closer to that cross. Continue to ask yourself, what does it mean to be a church, to be a peoples of the resurrection and the life? What does it mean to take that one little thing that God is asking you to do right now? Just that one little thing. To know it's not complete, that it's not going to be perfect, that it's not got all the answers, but to do it very, very well. And then maybe let it go. Or let it change. Or let it become something God would have it to become. What would it take for you to do that? We are prophets of a future that is not our own. We are prophets of a future that is not our own. Oscar Romero wrote that. We are prophets of a future that is not our own. Amen.